they're all talking about you.
Except for one woman in New Jersey.
I feel double act.
Yes, there's a seated. Isn't there an Astaire Kelly number that goes something like that, where they sit down on a park bench and?
Yes. Wouldn't you like to be able to dance like them? Perhaps you can.
Yeah. Well, I dance so. My dancing has been compared with theirs.
Yes.
I won't say how. What is your shoe size, incidentally?
Well, now that's an English size, 11.
Yeah, that's an enormous.
That's just one below a canal barge. But they're very comfortable. I didn't realize that you shot feet on television.
Well, I was trying to put you at your ease because I noticed that you had said something backstage about your shoes bothering you. You weren't sure you should have worn those, and I thought once we get that out of the way, we'd be.
Well, I've been in New York for a year now, and they were wonderful right through the winter. Except there's a little hole.
What is the, I don't know if you can see this, but there...
Can you see the hole?
There is a hole right there.
And that gathers snow, of course, as you tread in it, and it becomes impacted, and it's like a little glacier in there, and then you drop it on your hostess's favorite carpet.
Where can you get a pair of these?
Well, I think you'd have to go to England, yes.
Where do they come from, in fact? They are British boots, are they?
They're British boots, yes.
And what is the reason for the hole, and then we'll get off the subject?
I don't know.
No, because have you checked to see if it's in
one?
both?
Have you got one?
No.
Yes, it's in both.
I'm afraid these shoes somewhat call attention to themselves on the screen. They look like golf, dance, 30s musical shoes. Well, anything else you want to talk about?
No, I'm very bad on clothes, and I like to see them on other people, and sometimes off, but yes.
You know what we're proving here is that there's no business like shoe business. There's still, it's time to re-examine your contract and see if you have to stay here for the full 30 minutes.
I'm enjoying it so far.
Let's get to the real controversy here. Why was a dog named after you? And
well, I've
get
been
to the
told
bottom
that your
of this.
production company is called after your dog. Isn't
Yes,
that right? Daphne.
that is true.
Yeah.
But you had a dog named after you, which is another.
I did, because...
other way around or something.
Yes, the first thing that I ever did of note, or that people began to sit up at, was a couple of plays in England, one by Shakespeare, Richard II, and another by Marlowe, Edward II. And Jacqueline Suzanne, who at that time was at the height of her, I suppose in England, notoriety for her racy novels, none of which I've ever read, came to see those shows, and when she came back home to Hollywood, she just got a dog, and she named it Josephine. Now, she'd just written a novel called Josephine, but so she altered the spelling to Joseph Ian.
Using your first name
Exactly.
as part of it.
That's according to a gossip column in a Hollywood paper. And I tend to believe those things, as I'm sure you do. So. But alas, Miss Suzanne has died, and I never met her. And how the dog is doing, I've no idea. I wish it well.
That's quite an honor. That beats winning an Emmy or an Oscar. Or
yes, it does.
It's sort of nice to.
It's very personal. I can sort of relate to that.
You know. It's always safe to say, I suppose, when a play is running on Broadway, that the majority of the people watching on television, by definition, haven't seen it, simply because how could that many million people? And this is one of those cases where there's no way that you're the person I saw on the stage. And I know that isn't the goal of acting, to simply disguise yourself, but it's simply a miracle in the case of a great actor like yourself, that besides all the thrilling things you do, that there's no apparent similarity anywhere that I can see between you and everything I saw on the stage at Amadeus. Is that, have you had that experience with other people? Can you
I've-
meet someone and say...
It's very unnerving, and perhaps you feel it a little bit, to have related strongly to a performance and assume that that is revealing a great deal about the real man.
Sure.
And then you suddenly meet the real person, and you're slightly at a loss because he doesn't sound the same, look the same, or behave the same, or move the same, any of those things. However, that being so, I promise you that the character of Antonio Salieri, who you were looking at for 2 hours in Amadeus, was played by me and does contain a lot of me in him. That's part of acting, and I think a great part. When I started off acting, not having had any formal training, just having played a lot of parts at university, I thought acting was all about putting on beards and moustaches and fancy costumes and doing funny walks and funny voices and doing everything to disguise oneself. The sort of thing Olivier did when he was a young man. Well, if you ask him what happened, he'll say that halfway through his career he realized that he didn't need that false nose and he didn't need those false calves he used to wear, you know, underneath his tights to build up his legs.
Oh yeah, there's a word for those, I think.
False calves.
That's it.
And you know, you don't need the extra heel on your shoe. You are what you are, and you go out onto a stage using what you have been using all your life, because that is the thing which I think in the end is much more potent than something temporary like a quick moustache or a quick funny look or a funny walk. So actually, when I was being Salieri, I did look remarkably like myself, but there was something about the words and there was something about the inner intensity which I brought to them, which deceived you into thinking that I and Salieri are not alike, but actually we are quite alike, even though I don't go around trying to murder people, which he did.
Well, I suppose it stands to reason that an actor gets whatever he uses from inside himself. If not, then where does it come from?
Well, there are a number of actors, and I was one of them when I was younger, who looked anywhere except inside myself. And I think once actors should not generalize, I'm just talking about myself. Once I realized that I had inside myself everything that was required for almost every part ever written, even as an extreme a character as Macbeth, who's a mass murderer, thank you, or any extreme person, good or bad. Once you realize that the potential to be that is inside yourself, then acting becomes easier, it becomes releasing, and you become your own psychiatrist in a way.
Is everybody theoretically born with all those potentials in them, or?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
And it's the veneer of civilization and upbringing and the restraints which we put up on ourselves or have put on us by society and habit are very easily broken through. I mean, the stories of people in extremis in concentration camps or locked up and tortured for, you know, a couple of days, break all those things down very, very quickly, and people are revealed to be shambling wrecks or whatever is required by the people who are trying to change them. And I think you can, with a little diligence and searching, and the help of a playwright who gives you words and things to use your imagination on, you can reveal to yourself that, yes, you have enormous potential.
Is it particularly healthy in any way to call upon the murderer in yourself when you play Macbeth? Is it
Well, it has two effects. One, in that I sympathize with real life murderers. I mean, I see that they haven't been as lucky as most of us to feel the constraints of upbringing and personality, and they are abnormal, but they are not all that different from me, and therefore I'm not one of those people who goes about saying the way to deal with murderers is to hang them, because I think, well, I might be the next candidate for that treatment. And the other thing is perhaps having indulged a few fantasies that do creep around at the back of the brain. I mean, we must all at one point in our lives have thought, I want to stop that by killing it, even if it's only a dog that's yapping at the heels. Maybe an actor releasing that energy in rehearsal and those fantasies in performance will not be as inclined as other people to release them in real life. That's just a fervent hope. I don't think playing a murderer makes you think more and more about how you might be a murderer in real life, in other words.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder how that would work in prisons. I guess everybody knows by now that prisons turn people out worse than they went in, but we don't seem to have an alternative. I wonder, you know, there's a thrilling thing by, why is it you always have to stop and think, Dostoevsky or Tolstoy? Dostoevsky, I think about it. I think he's a theatrical in a Siberian prison.
Well, and there was the play about Marasad, which was being performed by the inmates of an asylum. I'm not quite sure for what reason now, but certainly at school, to take something that we all have experience of, it's certainly true in England, and I guess in America, that drama, plays, releasing a child's imagination, encouraging his fantasies in relationship to other people, always, I think that's the important thing, can make a child race ahead. It can stimulate his mind, it can get him interested in all sorts of subjects he wouldn't otherwise be interested in. I know teachers in England who would like to teach the whole spectrum of the syllabus, math and geography and certainly history, even the grammar of the English language they would like to teach through making up plays and putting themselves into situations. Dramatizing is what we call playing, isn't it, when we're kids? Yeah. And of course, drama is a play. It's the same word, play acting. Yeah. So there's no mystery about acting. The trouble with most people is that the older they get, the less conscious they are of playing, of play acting. And we all play all day long. You know, from the moment you get up, you're one thing with the person you've been sleeping with, and you're another person to the to your boss in the office, and another to the girl who serves you coffee at the office, and you're somebody else to the cab driver. It's a different side of your personality, which we all play. Yeah. And yet the people who do that will come up to me and say, "How on earth do you do it?" Well, I do it like they do it.
But they're right to ask you that, because the minute they step on stage, they don't know what to do with their hands, and they don't look, and they sound phony, and they can't act.
But we know plenty of actors like that, don't we? No, it is.
They don't associate the two.
Yes,
at all.
I know. Well,
and many actors don't. And even I've been interviewed sometimes by people who, even in an office, who are from a newspaper, will say, "Okay, let's start now," and declare the interview started. Do you feel that in your and this in the privacy of a room, their voice changes that much? You know what? I'd love to use you as a test for. Not long ago, I saw some amateur theatricals, and I was watching a girl who was not bad, but it was clear that she was an untrained beginning actress, and yet she had worked on it, obviously, and she was giving it her all. But there were little subtle things, and I couldn't figure out what they were, that made it clear to anybody who walked in that this girl was acting for maybe the third time. If you had to play a guy who's doing a scene from something you know, and the director said, I don't want to be awful, you know, I just want to make it clear that the guy's an amateur. Just subtly make it clear that he's an amateur. Maybe doing Henry V when he shouldn't.
Let me just be clear what you're asking me before I say whether I'll try and do it.
Okay.
That I should pretend to be an actor who isn't very good, or
who is just not bad, but inexperienced and an amateur.
It's so far from my own experience, Dick, that I
You've
don't
never
think
been?
I can do it. And I'm not going to try and do it because
I'll tell you what I mean.
I'm not frightfully good at that. You do it.
No, I can't do it. But I remember I was just thinking, there's just something about the way she's standing that isn't totally wrong, and yet no one stands that way in real life. No one gestures quite that way, but I can't really quite do it. Well, it's a little like asking a good horseman to ride badly.
All right. Well, now we're talking about the stage, aren't we? Not talking about film.
Yeah.
The trouble about the stage is that the audience sees the whole body. They are far enough away from it, even in a small theatre, to take it all in. And of course, because they're not engaged in the action of the play, they are there only to be an audience who listen, and indeed a spectator who watches. They can take it all in with an objectivity which normally they don't apply. I mean, we're talking together now, and apart from our opening, I've not looked at your shoes once. But if I were in the audience, I could still, or I with a camera, I could take it all in. So that you, trying to impress the audience, will have to be aware of what your feet are doing in a way that you don't, talking to me, have to be aware of it. And I think that's the initial problem that an actor has to solve, so that if I'm talking to you, all I need to bother about is my feet, and I can be doing anything I want with the rest of my body, and it's not really upsetting you, because you don't, you know, you're concentrating on my eyes. But all those people have seen that I'm terribly nervous back here, even as I'm gabbing on, of being very relaxed. So an actor has to somehow, it's the great word all actors use, relax. And that relaxation is a technical achievement which is to do with relating, having control over every part of their body, their minds, so that it doesn't wander, their imaginations, their face, the tone of their voice, so that all those attributes can express the character that he is portraying and the intention that that character has in speaking or in being or listening or sitting still. And when you have that total control over all your attributes, you are no longer being an ordinary person. You are then playing, you are then acting. And although it looks natural to the audience, if a member of the audience were to step up onto a stage and see a person behaving, playing in this way, once they got up to him, they would say, "What's the matter with this guy? He's behaving very peculiarly."
Seen close up.
Seen up close too. So it's all to do with distance. Now, in the movies, it seems to me, not having made very many, that's the crucial difference, that the camera is very like somebody just in the room with you. It concentrates very partially on you, usually on the face. And the body can be doing what it wants. That's why so often when wonderful film actors step out onto a stage, you have the same reaction as you did with that young girl who's only acted 3 times. You say, what's happening with those hands? They're usually twitching because they're getting rid of a lot of nervous energy. In which case you put them in your pockets. Oh, actors also don't put your hands in your pockets. I think that's the very best place for them.
So
Does that sound credible, what I've just said?
Yeah, that's very illuminating. It's the opposite of genius in a way. There are subtle signs that betray the amateur that you can't quite pick out. They're not as obvious as jiggling their hands. It's just something's a little wrong. Just as with a great actor, you can't exactly say why he's thrilling you at that moment. You just know that it is. It's not quite an opposite, but it's. Did you ever have trouble with your hands? I remember reading a book on acting when I was a kid that said. It was really a beginner's book on acting, written for about 9th grade level. And one line in it, it said, when you get on stage, the first thing you'll think of is that everybody's looking at your hands. Forget it, they're not. But can you remember a time when you wondered what to do with your hands on stage? Can you recall that?
Yes, and it's amazing because I look at these things when I go to see plays, which I do a lot, that so many actors don't know what to do with their hands.
Even yet?
Even yet, it doesn't matter how old they are.
What do you do with your hands?
Well, going back to what I just said, I try and tie them up to my thoughts and my imagination and my face. I don't, but then, of course, having achieved a certain relaxation, I might decide to signal something to the audience, which they should receive, that they should understand that although I am very calm, I am, the character is a little bit nervous, so I will throw out what we call, is it body language that we all know about these days? Yes. Of course, you want me to get deeper into this or not?
Yeah, take a chance.
All the great actors, right from Richard Burbage, who was the first man to play Shakespeare's parts, right through to Olivier, Marlon Brando, whoever you take as the latest exponent of great acting, I'm mainly talking about the theatre, have been praised for their reality. They are so truthful.
True to life is the average person's judge of an actor.
Now, I don't know how you imagine Richard Burbage acted, you know, in those great big open-air theatres with no scenery, but you could imagine it was all sort of this sort of thing. And yet when Burbage died, someone said, "Burbage dead? That cannot be. I've seen him die as King Lear, Othello, Hamlet. How can it be he's died?" He had been, to that audience, so real. But we know from pictures of the old actors and from films of the 19th century actors that their notion of reality was quite other from ours. It reflected the age in which they lived. Henry Irving, 19th century actor, his notion of reality. The bells, the bells, the bells. Once you can repeat something 3 times because the British Empire will never set, and there's nothing wrong with the world, you know, and the certainties of the bells. Well, today, it's all twitches and body language.
And you could actually, they could move an audience to tears with what would get roars of laughter now.
Exactly. And so fashions of reality change, and the reality today is all governed by this thing, the camera. It can get in very close, and it can guess what is behind. Everything is ambiguous. Everything has to be guessed at. Everything is subtle, and even then we may not reach the truth.
Yes, it can be uncomfortable knowing that a million people are looking into your dimple.
Well, that's why I want to do more films, and the film which you're dying to talk about, The Priest of Love.
I was going to tell you that we're also governed by that, the clock. Take my word for it. Pretend you see one there.
Okay.
And I think when we speak of clocks that you see them there. And here is a scene from the film
Terrific.
in which you play D.H. Lawrence.
Yes.
And before we go into it, and we have only a few minutes left, believe it or not. Gee, that was interesting, the way you talked about acting. What should we know about this?
That it's a biography of the love story between D.H. Lawrence, the English writer, and his amazing wife, Frida, and their travels around the world looking for happiness against all the odds. John Gielgud chasing after them, burning the books, deporting his paintings.
Gielgud plays the censor.
Yes, he does.
Had you had the opportunity, was there something you would have wanted us to know before you saw that precise clip?
Only that neither of those people was Ava Gardner.
More's the pity.
No, I think just that it's a reflective passage towards the end of the movie when he's dying of tuberculosis, but with his typical guts, is trying to gear himself up to writing his last book, Lady Chatterley's Lover, which he achieves at the climax of the movie.
What's the truth in how much she helped him and collaborated on that work?
I think the scene you've just seen is typical of the way they worked. He was, once he had sensationally rescued her from a dull marriage, and they had a divorce case which I think set the pattern for divorce in this century. It was 70 years ago, you know, that they were amazing the work with divorce. They then clung to each other through thick and thin, and I think, as you said, every woman he subsequently wrote about was mainly Frida, whether it was a mother figure or the lioness that he called her, or the mistress, or whatever. And out of that wonderful tempestuous relationship, I think came a great deal in the novels, and much of the poetry. I mean, his love poetry is just staggering, and it's all written to Frida.
Did you know a lot about him beforehand? Are you old enough to have Lady Chatterley's Lover been considered a dirty book in your pubertal years?
Certainly, and I read the relevant pages.
The much-soiled pages.
I think it's only 15 years ago that we've been allowed to read the whole thing in England.
Right. Amazing.
It's astonishing. Yeah. But I come from the same part of the world as he does, and share a similar background, and had always known about D.H. Lawrence and studied him a little bit at university, but now know a great deal more about him. And met, when I was dressed up and read all that redness, one or two people who knew Lawrence. And we were in northern Italy, and I walked into the kitchen of the villa where we were filming. There was a little old grandma in black, and as I walked in, she said, "Lorenzo."
Oh, really?
And I said, well, yes, of course I'm playing Lorenzo. No, but she had been a maid in an hotel when the Lawrences had visited there half a century before. I mean, her memory may have been a little shaky, but it was...
Still, she didn't mistake you for one of the Smith brothers.
Exactly.
Well, any man who had the sense not to go ahead with a movie that was going to be titled The Bells of Hell Go Ting-a-ling-a-ling, I think is... I know you think I'm making that up, but wasn't there once such a project? We don't have time to talk about it, man.
There was a project. We started making it, and it began to snow in Switzerland, so we stopped, but it gave me $4,000, which kept me for the next year, and meant that I could work in the theatre, which is where at that time I belonged, and so it saved my life in a way.
It's nice.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know, it's really, doing something like this is really very difficult. A lot of people don't realize that for an actor, he feels very secure behind that montage of photos that you were showing. Then you're playing a role, you've got wardrobe, you've got a part to hide behind. But when you come out like this, you really feel completely naked because you have to be yourself. But I want to confess one thing to you. I must say that Dick Cavett is very helpful because just before I went on, he told me that, he says, look, just to remind you, the chair you sit in is the one that I'm not sitting in. So...
I guess I tend to treat actors like dummies.
Exactly.
I didn't mean to.
As a matter of fact, I want to interrupt you again, Dick. You know, you said... you said on your...
It's hard for him, but easy for me tonight.
You know, you said, I was listening, it was very amusing, and you were jokingly saying you were Kirk Douglas. Now, on my way to the theater tonight, I was rushing, because I love to walk in New York. And I was a little late, so I was walking rather fast, and somebody from across the street yelled to me, "Hey!" And he ran across, and he said, "Gee, my favorite actor." And I said, "Thank you, I'm in a little hurry." He said, "You know, I'm so excited and so nervous." He said, "Your name went right out of my mind." Well, I said, "My name's Douglas." "Yeah," he says, "Douglas Fairbanks, my favorite actor." So it's very important when you say,
After all this time.
you know, it's very important when you say who you are.
Yeah.
You know,
But you do have a beard, though, and so there's a little confusion there. I mean, as to whether it's actually you or not, because the...
if I wear a beard, Dick, it's because I'm either just going out of a picture or going into another one.
Yeah.
Right now, I'll be going into a picture that calls for a beard, and I can't stand, you know, one of those false beards.
I feel I should ask someone of your stature an important question right off the bat, and so I will. Carol Burnett was here last night and wanted to know how you clean your dimple in your chin.
Dick.
No,
Dick.
Burnett.
Dick.
Yes, Mr. D.
Is nothing sacred?
No, I want to get that out of the way right away because...
I mean, must there be no secrets between me and me?
Well, I thought we'd get that out of the way because she wanted to know. Her heart seemed set on it, the silly girl.
As a matter of fact, in a picture I did once with Kim Novak, that was one of the lines where she kept staring at me. I said, "What's the matter?" She says, how do you shave that?"
Yeah.
Well, the answer's in that picture, Dick.
So, go back and see the movie, and I'll know the answer. There have been all sorts of rumors about it, like something lives in there, and all sorts of strange things. And I know you're sick of that.
No.
Hey.
As a matter of fact, someone once said that there's a little midget with a straight razor who jumps down there and cleans it out.
I'd believe it. But it isn't. I'm sorry we can't see it because I saw your film last night. We'll talk about that later. But it is quite a phenomenon, the chin. It's
there.
It's the most...
as a matter of fact, it's not really a dimple. Let's face it. It's a hole in the chin.
Is it really? Yeah.
Is it really?
Is it? Well, I don't know. I mean, I know that if we could see it, it would be the most cleavage we've had on the show in a long time. But enough of that. Now that's over.
You know, when you say, "Is it really?" One day I was riding to Palm Springs. I have a home in Palm Springs, and I was in a little car, and a sailor was hitching a ride, and I stopped and I picked him up, and he looked at me, and he got very excited. He said, "Hey, do you know who you are?"
Did he?
He wanted to share something.
That is, people cannot believe sometimes when they see, well, especially a face like yours. Can you go anywhere? Can you go in and buy a spool of thread, for example, and have the lady in the dime store not know?
Well, the last time I bought a spool of thread, no one recognized me.
Hey, something we got past, and I thought we ought to do this now. You'd mentioned Kim Novak and all the leading ladies that you've done. There's a bit of film that's been sort of assembled that shows the incredible number of women who've passed through your hands.
Well, you know,
in the years.
You see, Dick, you know, most people have a distorted idea, you know, of a movie actor. I mean, it all seems rather simple, but a lot of people don't realize. For example, if I do, like I worked recently in a picture with Faye Dunaway. Mm-hmm. Now, an actor, I'd have to get up in the morning about 6:30, take a shower, rush through my breakfast, jump in the car, go down to the studio, get into wardrobe and makeup, and then at 9 o'clock in the morning, under those hot lights, I'd have to start making love to Faye Dunaway hour after hour after hour. And these are the things that actors have to do.
Yes.
As I was watching these clips from movies that I've done, I suddenly realized, you know, an actor is supposed to immerse himself in the role.
Mm-hmm.
He's supposed to be the character that he's playing. And as I watch those clips, I have a feeling that sometimes a little bit of Kirk Douglas creeps into these scenes.
I would think it'd be
Yes.
hard to keep it out. Yes. We just saw all those ladies that you've worked with. Hitchcock said in an interview once that it's very hard for the romance on the screen not to carry over into the private lives of the actors. Have you found this true? And another thing I want to ask.
Now that we've answered that,
You're free to reject any question. I don't know where he said that. I think maybe it was in that Truffaut interview that he had found that it often happened. I don't see why it should. You can keep a
well,
professional
as a matter
distance.
of fact, I don't think, seriously, Dick, I think very often you might have a very good relationship with the person that you're working with, your leading lady, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the scenes you play will necessarily be good. In other words,
That's interesting.
it doesn't work. You know, people
Yeah.
love to say, oh, they're great romance carried over and spilled over on the screen. I don't think that's
Yeah.
true. I think it's something how, you know, you play a scene and something catches fire or it doesn't. In other words, I don't think that it necessarily follows because two people have a very close rapport that it's going to carry over into that
I
scene.
think if anything, it might even inhibit it because they would be aware of maybe comparing it with
I
what
think
they're
possibly
what's going
so.
on off stage.
Yes.
You really have been through some incredible things in your career. I mean, the violence of the things you've been through in the films. Have you ever been
Well-
badly hurt?
Yes, I've been hurt several times. I broke my nose in a picture, I broke a finger, and I broke a rib. You know, it's strange because when I started my career, you're studying Shakespeare and Ibsen, and then you start doing movies, and then suddenly you have to learn how to mount horses and juggle and skip rope and fight, and suddenly all that Shakespeare training, you wonder whatever happened to that. And I actually think that in theater, acting, movie making, in your field, I really think that vitality, energy, is the first requirement, because if you don't have vitality and energy, you can't do anything else.
Do you do push-ups every day or a regimen of exercise?
I do exercise every day because so many of the movies that I've done involves so much exercise that has been conditioning, but I always do 5 to 10 minutes of exercise. I think that's all. Oh, I think that's all you need.
Thinking about, you know, when I have a beard, I look exactly like you. Well, approximately like you.
You know, we were talking about earlier, Dick, about mistaken identity. I think the wildest thing that happened to me once, Burt Lancaster's a friend of mine, and he did a picture years ago called Trapeze.
Yeah.
He's very good in it. And one day, Burt and I were having dinner in a restaurant in Palm Springs, and a man came up, had a few drinks, and he walked right past Burt, came right up to me, and started off by saying, "Mr. Mitchum?" Now, that was just the beginning. And I never corrected him. I said, "Yes." He says, "Mr. Mitchum, I want to tell you how wonderful I thought you were in trapeze." I mean, this is what you call a triple mistake. He got it all confused.
That doesn't crush you to think that they don't have the...
Oh,
the
no,
things
I
that
think
mistake
that,
like that? I mean,
Dick, I think very often, usually when I meet people, I always say, "Hello, my name's Kirk Douglas." They say, "Well, I know who you are." But very often I think people recognize you. You know, they may have seen you, but sometimes they get a little bewildered. You know, they know the face is familiar. I did the reverse on someone once. I was in a town for personal appearances with a movie, and it was in a big hotel, and there was a big convention taking place. And as I got in the elevator, there were a lot of people around. You know, they'd had a few drinks, and a lot of people had these badges on, you know, it says Joe Tyne, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
yeah.
And a fellow walks in with one of these badges, and he's all excited. "Hey," he says, "Kirk Douglas." And I said, "Joe." He says, "How do you know me?" I said, "Aren't you Joe Tyne?" He says, "Yeah." The sign is right there like that. I said, "Well, it is Joe Tyne, Tulsa, Oklahoma." "Yeah," he said. I said, "Joe," by this time I was almost at my floor. I said, "Joe, I'm surprised you don't even remember." And I walked out of the elevator.
To this day,
So if Joe Tyne's listening...
Now he knows how you knew. We've crushed him. Does the pressure ever get too great? I know that your life is, you referred to it as a sort of almost corny story because you really, all the cliches, rags to riches, your parents came over as immigrants, you had no money, your father was a peddler, as I remember.
That's right.
All of that. You've said that it's almost a B-movie plot, the story of your
isn't
life.
Almost, it really is. You know, when I did a tour for the State Department, and my wife and I, we went around talking to students all over the world, and you see, my life, that B story, is it's the American story. It's the thing that's a B story here. It's an A story in any other country. It happens often here, but you go outside of the United States, it doesn't happen very often. I mean, I have many friends whose parents were immigrants, who struggled like I did, didn't have enough to eat, and then they went off to become lawyers, doctors, then a few go wrong like myself and become actors.
Yeah. But it's really a dream come true in a sense, in that cliche sense. Was there ever a time when you really had the dream, I will be a famous actor someday, or did it just unfold?
After I graduated from St. Lawrence University, Dick, I was going to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, studying to be an actor, and I was working as a waiter in Schraff's restaurant. And I remember one night, I had my pocket full of tips, and I was walking down Central Park. I'd had a few beers, and a few of the other waiters, who all would-be actors, were walking down, and I pointed up to the Hampshire House, and I said, one of these days, I said, I'm going to come back to this town, and I'm going to take a suite on the 25th floor, and I'm going to look down at this park. And it was wonderful having this dream. And sure enough, in B-story fashion, years later, I did a picture Champion. I came back to New York, and I took a suite on the 25th floor, and I looked down at Central Park, and very honestly, I was rather sad, and I felt as if, I think what happens is when a dream is fulfilled, it leaves with it a certain amount of sadness. So I think that you always have to have another dream quickly to replace the dream. I don't think that...
What can you do, though, beyond that? The 28th floor? Or,
No, but seriously, you have to always strive. You have to have something that you have to strive for, or you're robbed. I mean, Tennessee Williams deals with this in a preface in one of his books. He calls it the catastrophe of success, in which he explains this feeling that happened to him. And so I think a fulfillment of one dream should be replaced with another dream. Do you dream a lot, by the way?
Do I dream a lot?
Do you have dreams?
Oh, yeah. I have some that would curl your beard. But television is hardly the place to talk about them. But I don't remember. Yeah, I have a corny one once. I don't think I ever told anybody this, but I once was... Do you want to hear it?
Listen.
Do you have a degree in psychiatry? Can you help me?
No, but I'm very sympathetic and I'm a good listener, and I want to hear about this.
I was crossing Madison Avenue one time, and I was a really out-of-work actor. I can remember a nickel rolled off the bureau one morning, and it went down where I could never get on the floor. And I thought, that's how poor I am. I'm going to have to walk to work. I was going to take the subway with that nickel and it done. And I was walking around that day, and I was really discouraged. I was making the rounds, and I saw a silver spire on top of a building that the sun hit just right. And I thought, that's a sign that my career is going to take an upward turn. And
Where did
I'm
you
going
go
to come
wrong?
I don't know. And nothing happened for years after that. No, but I remember thinking that's like in a movie. There's that silver spire,
but seriously, Dick.
But now here I am on television talking to Kirk Douglas, and it's an empty experience.
No, I tell you,
it's like you said.
I tell you, Dick. I tell you why. I tell you why you failed. You see, you heard. Look, Dick. We talk about image.
Yes.
You see what I mean? Now, I used to come on a television show the way you are. I always wore a tie, a shirt.
Yeah.
You see, that's the wrong image. Now, you watch the up-and-coming people now. Never wear a tie, never sit, If you took off the tie, seriously, Dick.
Oh,
take off the tie. Unbutton, not too low. No, this is a family
I'll
show.
just loosen it.
Now you're a hit, right?
Yeah? Wait a minute, I'm getting my compulsion. You've released my compulsion. I take my shirt off at the oddest time. Yeah. Now, if you were really a loose guy like you're telling me to be, you'd take your shirt off. you a chicken or not? What, you have another dimple we don't know about? I'm sorry,
I'm a neighbor.
See, when the mood passes, I don't know what to do.
You know, as it is, I'm in trouble with my wife. The last thing she said to me is, when you go on Dick Cavett's show, please, it's a very dignified, he's a very erudite fellow. Please be dignified. I'm in trouble already.
I hope she's watching now. You know,
Yes.
I've often wondered, this is a complete change of subject now, but do you think we get our image of how we behave from the movies?
Very much so.
Do people...
Very much so. I think that very often in pictures that
Yeah?
I've done, you know, I think it's sometimes in relationships that I've had with girls on the screen, it teaches them, you know, a point of view, tenderness, an approach of consideration. I think
Yeah.
you get a lot of this, certainly in movies that I've done.
I think I was shaped, my feelings, at least as a kid, I remember thinking, so that's how you behave with ladies. You
You know,
the way you saw it on
how
the screen.
to light 2 cigarettes at once.
Yeah.
You know, how to be gentle, kind, considerate.
I could never figure out, though, as a kid in Nebraska, where those nightclubs were that I saw in the movies. But
Well, you
here's a
never
little-
ran into that beautiful girl as you're walking down the street and suddenly she said you got a light and she was gorgeous. It was either Lauren Bacall or Lana Turner and you...
No, not in Grand
Those-
Island. It was
yeah,
the assistant
then-
librarian. Can we, let's take a look at this, though, and because I think this clip isn't, this is from Champion, which
Oh,
is...
now this is a perfect scene to show, I mean, manners, to show how a man should treat a lady.
Good
I think
influence
so.
of film on... Okay.
Yes. You know, in that scene, it just reminded me when I said I used the address 46 Eagle Street. Well, I used to live on 46 Eagle Street in Amsterdam, New York, when I was a kid. It's a little town upstate. And I remember after this picture, my mother was alive then, and my mother, whose name is Bryna, by the way, is the name of my company now, the Bryna Company.
Yeah.
And I called my mother up, you know, and I said, gee, Ma, I just signed $1 million contract. She said, but son, are you eating enough? I said, yeah, Ma, I signed $1 million contract. You looked awful thin in your last picture. You know, my mother, a typical immigrant woman, I mean, she couldn't, you know, that was all beyond her
A million would be
comprehension. All she was
inconceivable.
concerned about, were you eating enough? Were you putting on enough weight?
What did she think when you played a nasty character like that guy? I mean, you have a way of being lovable and hateable at the same time. You know,
Well, you know, I really think it seriously bothered my mother. You know, when I played someone like the scene that we just saw in Champion, and I've played, you know, I've always believed virtue is not photogenic, and I think I've always been attracted to a part. I rather play the evil character most of the time than the nice fellow, and I think it really bothered my mother because she would tell people, you know, no, my son's not like that. He's really a nice boy.
There seemed to be a period, I was reading back clippings about you and all, where they liked to say that you were not a nice guy. A famous lady columnist, I believe, said that after
Well-
that movie, which made you, as they say,
Well-
that you became less than pleasant.
Well, as a matter of fact, what she actually said, well, I won't say exactly what she said, but right after the picture, Hedda Hopper, who was quite a character, said, you know, Kirk Douglas, she said, ever since Champions come out, you've become a real SOB. She actually said it. And I said, you know, by this time, everybody had been saying all these things. The minute something happens that's successful, I said, look, Hedda, you're absolutely wrong. I said, you know, I was an SOB before Champion, but you never noticed it. But the point is, Dick, that really, I think the difficult thing is that in movies, no one is equipped to take any kind of success. And if, after a person does his first successful picture, really he doesn't change as much as other people change. Their whole attitude changes toward him, and it's a difficult readjustment. I'm sure you find that readjustment since the time you were looking for that
nickel.
for that nickel. Suddenly, it's a difficult process of readjusting to any form of success. I think it's very difficult.
That is true. The background changes behind you, really, in a way.
Exactly. And people, in a sense, change more than you
than
do,
you
but they're not aware of it because they look at you differently.
I'd still like to have that nickel, though. Which movie would you flush down the John of yours?
Oh, that's very easy.
Oh.
I have several that could go that route, but I think the one that I would do the quickest to is a picture called big trees. I literally did it for nothing. I had the only time I ever had a contract, which was I've always been independent, was a picture a year at Warner Brothers, and I wanted to get out of that picture a year. So they said, no, you can't get out. I said, I'll get out. I'll do the next picture for nothing. They said, you're kidding? I said, no, I'll do it. They don't have to pay me. So I did the picture. It was called Big Trees. I did it for nothing. It was a terrible picture, and that's the way it should end.
And that's the way. How do you convince Internal Revenue that you actually did a movie and got no money for it? Did they have to give you a little note saying,
No,
Kirk
they
is
pay-
telling the truth?
They have to pay me something. They paid me for that picture about as much as you pay me for being on this show.
Then you have no problems. I can see.
Just to satisfy the tax people.
But you haven't been affected by the slump. We hear that Hollywood is a ghost town, that it's really a boarded-up place, and yet you've got 3 or 4 irons in the fire all the time. How have you managed to avoid the slump?
Well, I don't think so much of it as a slump, Dick, as I think it definitely is going through a transition period. I think there's a need for movies. Movies will become more and more important. I think people love movies. You need them on TV as well as in theaters. In my own case, because I was always independent, because I've also loved to work in finding properties and develop them, if I couldn't find financing here, I went to Europe. I had Light at the Edge of the World, a picture I did with Yul Brynner of Jules Verne, that was financed in Spain. Catch Me a Spy, a picture coming out this fall, was financed with France and London. Yeah. And then I did a Western with Johnny Cash, a gunfight, and that picture was financed by the Hickory Apache Indian tribe.
I was going to ask you about that.
Go ahead, ask me.
I don't need to now. No, seriously, I saw the movie last night, and of course, one feels obligated to say I enjoyed it, even if you didn't. But I did in this case, luckily, so it's easy to say. It's a real good Western. And right at the beginning, it says the Hickory Apaches present, or something. It doesn't actually say present, but I wondered about that.
No, the Hickory Apache Indian tribe in Dulce, New Mexico, actually financed the film. They put up over $2 million to finance the film, and there are no Indians in it. And as a matter of fact, when they came to, we had a press conference in Los Angeles. Yeah. When they came, we were walking into the press conference, and a reporter came up to me and said, Kirk, are those Indians in your next picture? I said, are they in the picture? They own it, which of course they do. They have put up the financing.
Why do the Hickory Apaches have money when most Indians are really in terrible straits?
Well, I think it depends. I think there are other tribes who have managed their finances much better and have done. I don't think they're the only Indian tribe that have money. I think the Hickory Apache Indian tribe have a very sophisticated program of investments. I hope that their investment in a gunfight turns out very well, because I'd hate to be a scalped actor.
Yes, how do you say diplomatically to a group of Apache warriors, you've taken a bath at the box office, boys? That's a terrible thought. But it is
but
really
I think with a gunfight, I think they're going to do very well. I hope so,
yeah,
because it will encourage them to invest in other pictures. If not, I don't know what will happen.
Yeah. But I'd love to hear a little about that movie, because it's a thoroughly entertaining movie. I was surprised, I don't know why I should be surprised, that Johnny Cash was such a good actor. You always, do you ever resent it a little bit when you've been in 55 movies and he's in one and he comes off as well as an actor who's been in many, many movies?
Oh, no, I've never had that problem. I think the better the other person is, the better I can be. Yeah. As a matter of fact, in a gunfight, I picked Johnny Cash. I watched him on TV, and I think he has a wonderful quality. And I never met him before. I just picked up the phone and talked to him. We had about 4 or 5 conversations on the phone. He was very apprehensive about doing a movie, and I sent him the script, and finally went down to Nashville, Tennessee. And, he agreed to do the picture. And I thought, did you think he was wonderful?
Yes, I think
he has a wonderful quality when you think it's about his...
of course, and it's perfect for this.
It's about his first movie, and I think he does a terrific job.
Yeah, there's no sense of a guy just making it, like there often is when a guy makes his first film. You forget about it.
Do you have a clip from...
I have a piece from Gunfight, yeah. Oh, yeah, I wouldn't invite you here and show a piece from a Laurel and Hardy movie.
You wouldn't.
Do you want to see it? I don't want to bore you with it if you don't want to see it.
It's your show. I've seen the movie.
Yeah.
It's really strange to watch yourself in a movie. It just occurred to me, at one time I had a real hang-up. There were like 6 movies that I'd already finished that I had never
seen.
Never seen.
Really?
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where I think I've seen, but I rarely, there are very few movies that I can watch myself in. I'm always dissatisfied. As a matter of fact, there's only one movie that I really love watching myself in. It's a little picture called Lonely Are the Brave.
Oh, yeah.
And when I watch that movie, I say, Kirk, terrific. It's the only movie. I mean, otherwise, it's a funny feeling. Now, in this scene, I really, see, I don't think people realize what a tremendous thing that is for Johnny Cash, really in his first feature picture, to do such a good job. I think he's wonderful.
Yeah,
After all, I have done a few movies.
I love the way he does that line about that may be true, but somebody did kill Johnny Ringo. Is that the name?
Wonderful. He has a wonderful quality.
Why do you look bigger on the screen? Are you as big as you'd like to be? I mean, no, I mean, you do look a little bigger. As I see you here, you're no shrimp by any means. But you know what I mean? You have a slight increase of size on the screen.
There's a theory that actors, so-called stars, should never appear as they are. Because how can you ever be as big as people think of you on the screen?
Yeah.
The screen, you're bigger than life. When you think of the Romans that I've killed, the blood, oh my gosh, the blood. You think of all the things you do, movies should be bigger than life.
Yeah.
So that's why it's difficult when the public is used to seeing you on the screen where one eye can be about 5 feet, and suddenly it's, in many ways, it's a letdown. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Dick. I really wanted you to.
Fine. I mean, if they don't have a bigger version of you, this will do. What is your actual height?
5'11".
It is 5'11".
Yeah.
You're taller than Richard Burton, then.
Well, I've never.
Yeah.
So. Is that good?
I guess so.
I'm ahead of the game?
To be ahead of Burton in anything is good.
I see.
We're talking during the break about, you mentioned you broke your nose earlier, and during the break I asked you how. It was a horse broke it for you.
Well, I was doing a horse fall. We're talking about, in Europe, with European films, very often they don't do a horse fall. It's dangerous for the horse. But in
I'm
the
sure
United
they mash
States,
them up over there. Yeah.
Oh, it's very often serious. In the United States, a horse is trained to fall. Yeah. And I was doing a picture called Indian Fighter. As a matter of fact, the first movie I did with my company, Bryna, and the first time Walter Matthau worked in the picture. And I was falling a horse in the picture, and the signal to fall the horse was to pull, it varies in different horses, to pull one rein, so you pull the horse's head around and he falls. And then the danger is you got to get this leg out of the way, you see, so when the horse falls, you get this leg out. When you fall down with it, you can't fall. But one time, in falling the horse, I leaned over, and when the horse's head went around, bang, ooh, broken nose. Yeah.
And did it push your nose into your, into your face?
Did a little, it's still a little crooked.
Yeah.
I hate to keep, pointing out these imperfections because you've been so good at pointing them out for me, but I hate to add to these imperfections, but I do have a crooked nose.
That's right. But people like to know that you're human. And that
I see.
I think that's terrific about the Hickory Apaches. I can't get over that, financing the movie. I don't think they'd finance a John Wayne movie, though, if they read his Playboy interview. Did you see that? He said he didn't think that it was bad that we took this country away from the Indians because a lot of people needed land, and the Indians were being selfish and thought that they ought to have it. And is that the John Wayne you know?
No
you made
comment.
a movie
No,
with
as a matter of fact, I don't want to get involved in a conversation on John Wayne. Because I tell you, I've made quite.
You're closer to his size than I am, so get in here.
No, I've made quite a few pictures with John Wayne, and by the way, I've always called him John. Everybody calls him Duke.
Yeah.
We have never seen eye to eye on a lot of things, but professionally, I think he's one of the most professional actors I've ever worked with.
Oh yeah, he is.
And I've worked, I don't know, about 4 or 5 pictures with him. The last one I did was War Wagon. We worked in Harm's Way. In Cast a Giant Shadow, which was a picture done in Israel, Wayne was the one who set it up. Yeah. Wayne is the one who called me in London and said, "Hey, Kirk, I think there's a part you ought to play." So we have never, whenever we work in a picture, we rarely, maybe we'll have dinner together one night during the whole picture. But we get along very well. We never discuss politics.
Stay off politics, that's right. Yeah.
That's right. But he's the first guy on the set. He's the hardest worker I've ever worked with. Yeah. And I think he's quite a character. As a matter of fact, I just saw a picture of his Big Jake, which will be coming out soon. and it's a really good John Wayne picture.
He really is a giant personality on the screen.
Yes,
so-
he is.
so-
I mean,
Has he been hurt by a horse? Would a horse dare hurt him?
oh, I think he'd hurt a horse.
Probably. They really can't get a horse big enough for him, can they? How big is John Wayne? I'm interested in dimensions.
I'd say John's about 6'4".
He is that tall.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh sure.
No wonder you don't see eye to eye. Oh, there I am, harping on your size again. You made a Jules Verne film that I've heard about for some time, and I don't mean 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. That's
Oh no,
back.
right
but
at the edge of the world. Yeah, as
Is
a matter
that
of fact,
that's coming out?
it's coming out. It opened in Washington. It's coming out soon in this area. And matter of fact, the reason I did it was because of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I always wanted to do another Jules Verne picture.
There's a lot of good stuff in Jules Verne to do. Yeah. Wait a minute, we saw a horse with a horn, and then you running off the...
I was being pursued. That was a scene. Ewell plays this game where he has this sharp, like a unicorn on the horse, where he tries to run me down. That Light at the Edge of the World, again, is an example of the different ways of making movies. We've talked about the Indian tribe financing one. This was financed by a Spanish bank. And we shot this. This was all shot in Spain. Frankly, I get a little tired of going to far off places to make movies, and get away from my family. I prefer to be making more movies here.
Yeah. Talking with Kirk Douglas, we haven't been terribly personal tonight. Do you ever get really depressed, down, gloomy?
Sure, I think.
Don't want to go outside?
I mean, isn't that a human process? I think everybody, you go through different periods of your life where you sort of take self-inventory, and you wonder, what am I doing? Am I doing what I want to do? I think the person, really happiness in life, really is doing the work that you want to do. And I think for someone to be working at what he wants to do is very fortunate. So in that way, I think that I'm more aware now how lucky I am than I used to be. I think a lot of things that I used to take for granted, I appreciate now. Because I think I'm lucky to have been able to do the thing that I want to do in life, and that is to make movies. I think it's a great contribution, because I think the greatest contribution of movie making is not the statement that a movie might make. It's fine for a movie to have a statement, but I don't think there's anything, Dick, more important than the fact that if you make a movie and for an hour and a half or 2 hours, millions of people all over the world are taken out of their problems. The reason a person goes to a movie is to forget the problems of their life. So if you permit them to forget their problems and get involved in what you're doing on the screen, I think that's the most important contribution. And I think that sometimes there's a tendency to be pretentious with movies and become too concerned with making a statement. I've been guilty of the same thing myself. That's why in Light at the Edge of the World, I wanted to make sheer entertainment. If it could entertain someone for 2 hours, I think that's great.
So you don't have any doubts about your life being misspent. Some actors say a man in the acting profession always wonders if it's a really manly profession. Should he be out engineering?
Well, it isn't a manly profession. It's a childish profession. You couldn't be a complete grown-up adult and be an actor. You have to have a childish part of you. I mean, after all, if I were a sophisticated adult, how could I say, here I am fighting evil represented by Yul Brynner? You have to have a childish part of you. It's true.
Or making a guy take his shirt off
As
in
my
public.
Kids have grown up, I've watched them, Children are natural actors. They pretend they're cops and robbers. And I think all actors retain a certain amount of that within themselves. They have to, or they couldn't function as actors. And I think that's why they become self-denigrating. They think, well, it's not enough.
I get the feeling that you are capable of a terrific bad temper. All right. I see. I was right. No, I do. I have that, and it's probably one of the many things.
I don't see that in you.
It's probably one of the many things that we have in common.
Well, I don't know that
I wondered if you're snappish. Can you get?
Yes, I think, as a matter of fact, that's been a healthy thing for me.
Yeah.
I don't think it's given me a very pleasant reputation often, but I think it's been a good escape valve. I think very often I'm too quick to express myself in anger or whatever it might be. It's healthy for me because it lets the steam out, but very often if people don't understand it, it
How do you
doesn't
feel
create a
after
very favorable impression.
After you blow up at somebody, do you feel sad? afterwards?
Terrible.
Yeah,
Terrible.
I do too.
bother about, oh, what does
Yeah.
he think? Why did I say this? What a bully I was.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have said that. It's awful.
Yeah, I have that too. It's fun. What?
We
let's see
have a
what else
lot
we
in
can-
common, Dick.
Let's see. How much sleep do you need?
How much sleep do I need?
Yeah.
5-6 hours.
Uh,
We have nothing in common.
no, no. I can sleep literally round the clock. And,
Oh, really?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's one. No, no, I
from
don't
time
need.
to time.
If I have 5, 6, 7 hours, would be.
You read a newspaper every day?
Oh yes,
Do you?
yes. Don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, don't
Yeah.
you think actors are also concerned with what's going on in the world? Perhaps sometimes they're a little bit too concerned.
Some are, but I don't think they have to be. I mean, I don't think everybody has to be. I don't see why they should apologize if they don't, for example. I mean, some actors don't need to. They should just act or do what they want to do.
No, but you mean they don't read the paper? I mean, you're
Some-
still a part of the world you live in. You don't divorce yourself from the world you live in. You're interested
Yeah.
in knowing what's going on around you. I think everybody owes it themselves to be aware of the world they live in, to be a part of it.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's good if they do. but
Again, we don't have anything in
I don't
common.
insist on it. I mean, I think a man could just write poetry if he wanted to, and I wouldn't care if he ever read a paper or not.
Oh, I'm not concerned by that. I just think
Yeah.
that they would be missing something by not being concerned with what's happening
Oh,
in
sure.
the world. To just cut yourself off from the world would be, depriving yourself of your environment, so to speak.
I can see why an artist like Ingmar Bergman, for example, would say he just cuts himself off from all life the whole time he's making a film because he just wants that tunnel vision on his work.
Well, he may do that, sure. I can understand while you're making a film, you tend to block out the rest of the world. I understand that.
Yeah.
I think that happens to all of us. I think all actors tend to focus just on what they're doing, but that's just for a temporary period of time. Then you have to go back into the world you're living, no?
What's the closest you ever were to death?
Well,
You
as
ever
a
had a
matter of
moment where you
fact,
thought this is it?
I tell you very honestly,
Yeah.
it was in this picture, A Light at the Edge of the World. I'll tell you a very true story. We're shooting this picture. It has very sharp, jagged rocks all around. And in one scene, I did a stunt myself, and I thought I was being very careful. And I asked my stuntman I was up on top of a roof, and I had to jump down. So I put a platform below the roof, because the rocks were on the other side, and I put the stuntman there just to double check to brace me. It was in a rehearsal. I jumped off the roof onto the platform and went to him for support. He fell off. We both went right off the platform into the rocks. And I think, to me, I was very fortunate because the rocks there, if just have hit one jagged rock, it was about a 15, 18-foot fall, you could easily split your head open. And I think that accidents, when accidents happen in pictures very often, it's usually a silly thing. It's something that you never anticipated. And I try to anticipate. People very often say, I got a nose for danger. People very often say, Kirk, how does this smell? Because I think I don't do things stupidly. I've done lots of my own stunts, but I try to work everything out carefully.
But that one
In the
shows you
scene
up.
with Woody Strode, I wouldn't have done that if I wasn't confident in Woody. I knew that we could both work together.
Spartacus scene.
Yes.
Your son Michael was here one night, and
Yeah, yes, I was in
he's the
Europe
star of,
for that
not Summer Hill, but...
Summer Tree.
Summer Tree, yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it was a play. That was a play that I bought several years ago. My son, Michael, did it at the Eugene O'Neill Memorial Theater, and he told me he thought it was a good play. It was written by a 21-year-old. It was his first play. So I bought it, thinking he'd be wonderful, make it his first movie, and it took me 2 years before I could get him into it. He did Hail Hero and Adam at 6 a.m., but I'm proud of Michael. I think he's as a matter of fact, I'm proud of all my 4 sons. I think they all do pretty well.
That's good.
But Michael's the first one. Michael's my oldest. He's the first one to be an actor. And Eric, my youngest, by the way,
He's in Gunfight.
yeah, he played
In
my
Gunfight.
son in a gunfight. Summer Tree was directed by Anthony Newley. That was about
Oh,
the
was it?
second picture that Tony Newley ever did. I think he did a good job.
Would you let me make an experiment? Don't give away any clues here. How many know what movie he won the Oscar for? Anyone? Who knows? What? What? Spartacus? Who else has a guess? The Champion. Who else? That's right. Never
right.
won. It's interesting. People don't know. I mean, it doesn't matter. Or maybe it does. Does it matter to
no,
you?
I think a lot of people do know. I know.
You know. But I mean, it's funny, you just assume that a number of people have, and you start to see the list of people who haven't won an Oscar. It's astounding.
No,
Well, they give those honorary ones to make up for it after a while, but
No, I've been
does it
nominated
make any
3
difference?
times. But
Yeah, you're
yes,
up
it
all
makes,
the time.
It makes a big difference. I think every actor would really like to win an Oscar. I won a New York Film Critics Award for Lust for Life when they had newspapers.
Yeah.
But I think you'd like to win. An Oscar has great significance because it's voted on, by the people of your own industry.
Yeah.
And
yet George Scott has made it respectable to turn one down now.
Well, I thought George was very wrong. I voted for him because I thought he gave the best performance.
Yeah.
But I thought George was wrong. And as a matter of fact, I put George in almost one of his first pictures, List of Adrian Messenger.
Oh, yes.
I thought he was wrong because if you do a picture like Patton, which is done by a big studio, it's done with big money, you have an agent comes in and negotiates the biggest deal you can make for yourself, then as a result of that, if you're nominated, then to turn against the system, I think is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad that in spite of that, that George won the Oscar because I think he deserved it.
Yeah, even though he didn't want it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I won it.
Maybe you can get his. We have less than a minute in this segment left. Who got a part you wanted at some point?
Well, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you this. There are 2 people who got I'm Not So Smart. This, again, after all, this whole program was to show my imperfections. I'll give you a few more.
Okay.
You see, Dick, I'm Not So Smart because I turned down 2 parts. Both of them won Oscars.
What were they?
Stalag 17, Bill Holden won an Oscar.
Yeah.
Cat Ballou, Lee Marvin won an Oscar. I turned them both down. So you can add that to my imperfections.
That's pretty good. And Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, you turned down and made $1.5 million or something like that?
No, they offered me
Oh, they offered you that.
that much. And that's
Didn't
another
cost
one.
that to
That's another one of my boo-boos. Oh, you're really heaping it on. You know how to hurt a fellow.
I guess, how are you would be as good as anything to open with.
I'm kind of weary.
Are you wiped out from the jet trip?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. I appreciate the amount of miles you have been covering to get here, and you were delayed, and it was a ghastly story, but it's nice of you to come and put up with it all. I'm so self-conscious. I don't know what to do, because we spoke on the phone for over 6 hours, and a lot of it was about what neither of us can stand about this kind of program. To the point where I don't know how to avoid all that stuff. Will you help me as we move along?
Well, I think that I had a special treat because you allowed me to come into your life, and Dick described his background as a young boy in Nebraska, which I think would be worth telling for about 20 minutes. You mind if I go into all that?
I'd love it. I've suddenly forgotten it all.
Yeah.
Anyway, have you seen any good movies lately?
Super Rich Shadow?
Oh, that's supposed to be in my dressing room. No, that's part of the. That's merely
I
part of the commercial. Where was I? Do you go to the movies? Come to think of it.
Once in a while.
I'll tell you what happened. We talked on the phone, and at one point in the conversation, you reeled off about 7 or 8 things that you had observed about me watching the show. about how I sometimes don't like people and pretend that I do, and vice versa, and about a dozen more. And they were so uncanny and on the nose that I decided I could never work again. And now I feel it. Would you like a glass of water?
A bug just flew out of my glass.
I know it. I'm terribly embarrassed. As he started to pour the water, a bug flew out. Probably a critic. Anyway. Let me ask you an obligatory question, and we can get that out of the way right now. And if at any time I get into things that you don't want to talk about, give me a signal, puff out your cheeks.
Throw the picture at you.
That'd be fine. If you had the Academy Awards night to do over again, would you do any of that differently?
Well, I don't think so, no. I felt that that there was an opportunity for, since the American Indian hasn't been able to hear his voice heard, or have his voice heard, anywhere in the history of the United States, I felt that it was a marvelous opportunity for an Indian to be able to voice his opinion to 85 million people. I guess that was the number. And I felt that he had a right to, in view of what Hollywood has done to him. And I was embarrassed for Shasheen. She wasn't able to say what she intended to say. And I was distressed that people should have booed and whistled and stomped, even though perhaps it was directed at myself. They should have at least had the courtesy to listen to her. But I think she did very well, and I was very glad that she did have what opportunity she had to say what she did. And
why didn't you get to read your entire statement as you planned it?
Well, I think that they felt that it was inappropriate, and I actually don't know. I think they didn't want her there. They didn't want the evening interrupted with that particular note. And from their insular point of view, I felt that perhaps they had a point. But I don't think that people generally realize what the motion picture industry has done to the American Indian. As a matter of fact, all ethnic groups, all minorities, all non-whites. And people just simply don't realize. They just took it for granted that that's the way people were going to be presented, and these cliches were just going to be perpetuated. And so when someone makes a protest of some kind and says, no, please don't present the Chinese this way, or please, I mean, on this network every night, well, perhaps not every night, but you can see silly renditions of human behavior. The leering Filipino houseboy, the wily Japanese, or the kook or the gook, and the idiot black man, and the stupid Indian, and it just goes on and on and on. And people actually don't realize how deeply these people are injured by seeing themselves represented, not so much the adults, because they're already inured to that kind of pain and pressure, but children, Indian children, seeing Indians represented as savage, as ugly, as nasty, vicious, treacherous, drunken. They grow up only with a negative image of themselves, and it lasts a lifetime.
Did you
Is that an
expect
answer to your question?
Yeah. Did you expect the kind of outrage that you got from people? I believe, well, that very night, Raquel Welch made a joke against you, saying that, well, I hope the next person doesn't have a cause. Who's the who's the Western star who followed later? Steve McQueen. Clint Eastwood, yes, of course. I very seldom make mistakes. He did his version of a joke, and then John Wayne looked like he was about ready to get a posse together. He looked so sore. Did that surprise you, that they would be angered that you desecrated their cathedral?
I wasn't surprised, no. There were a number of people that felt that Sachin had not been welcomed and not been treated properly, and people that were sympathetic to what she was trying to say. And I received an awful lot of mail in support of that.
The booing made me sore.
Well, actually, I think the people were booing at me. They were booing because they thought, well, this moment is sacrosanct, and you're ruining our fantasy with the intrusion of a little reality. And I suppose it was perhaps unkind of me to do that, but there was a larger issue, and it's an issue that nobody in the motion picture industry has ever addressed themselves to, unless forced to. I mean, the blacks have brought about changes because they were just damn angry about it. And they thumped the tub and threatened and made some noise about it. But if they had just been silent and thought, well, gradually wisdom will come to those who are in the business of the movies, and they will do right by us, and today would never have come. We, have a lot to be grateful for, that the blacks were as insistent as they were that the image of blacks were changing. But it's a block by block fight. It's people are very timorous now about showing blacks in an unkindly light. But they would go on with the Filipino houseboy or the Indian. I mean, you see it every day on television. Not every day.
There's a World War II movie in which, actually it's John Wayne again, I don't mean to pick on him, in which he refers to Mr. Tojo's little yellow-bellied rats. And there was so much racism in World War II movies. You see, it's really, really surprising. I mean, it was so crude that it's worse than you remember it. The thing that bugged me, too, was that people said, there's Brando jumping on a social cause bandwagon now, getting in on the Indians, forgetting that in the 50s you were, I think, one of the first people fishing with the Puyallup Indians up on the West Coast. How much of what's been written about you can be trusted? There are a couple of books. There's...
Well, I've noticed that you always say, you look at your notes and you say to the interviewee.
Yes.
It was once, someone said about you once that this and that and the other thing, and it's, I always wondered why you did that.
Looked at them or said it?
Yeah, said it.
Well, if I look at them and say nothing, the show becomes so quiet that nobody can actually hear. You mean,
but I think that the press is a very poor reference for knowing somebody. I don't think that you... I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah. Well, there are two books in print purporting to tell the story of your life, your rages, your excesses, your lusts, your dreams. I think that I'm almost quoting from the cover of one of them. Can we trust those? And if not, how do they get away with it?
I don't think it's worth going into. I mean,
From their part or mine?
No, well, news, of course, is big business, and there are news items that are worth $100. There are some that are worth several $1,000s. Some news items are worth $100,000, and some are $2 items. But news is business, And people sell news. And unfortunately, people in my position, people in the public eye, are sellable commodities, but they're not any different than Kleenex or Dial soap or anything else. And so if we, find something out that's about your sex life or something that you do with your fingernails after you cut them off.
Who told you, man?
If you smoke the grime from your navel, then that's big news. That's important. He's Dick Cavett. Smokes the grime from his navel and he saves his fingernail parings.
I'd rather you hadn't mentioned that about me. I revealed that to you in private, and I thought I could trust you.
But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because finally, and I've found that people really don't believe all the nonsense they read. And they look at you when they meet you and wonder if it's true. Mm-hmm. But they finally make a decision on what their experience with you personally is. If it's for 5 minutes, or, if you say thank you to the hostess and she brings you a cup of coffee, well, then she thinks you're a courteous person. If you're tired and cranky and you're ill or something and you don't want to be disturbed or sign autographs and things like that, then they say, well, he's a kind of a funny person. But,
so whether or not you threw horse manure out of the top window of your old place on 52nd Street when you were young and yelled, watch out for the flying red horse, which is I'm just picking one at random that they always seem to write about you, is irrelevant. When people are watching you on the screen, I don't know whether they wonder if those things... But I always wonder, if those aren't true, then where do they come from?
Well, but I think you...
And did you?
I think that that's a kind of a question that... Well, there's a perfect example.
Yeah.
On your show, you have money items as well. You have items that you sell to the audience and items that were entertaining or they offer some sort of sparkling interlude for what otherwise might be a sea of dullness.
Of dullness?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a guest that's very boring and you ask them some question like that, well, I'm getting far afield. I think that you have to think about your ratings when you're giving the show, when you're doing the show. And you have to make the show as interesting as possible. And to the question of whether or not I throw manure out of, what was it?
Fourth-story window of a house on 52nd
yeah.
Street.
If I throw manure out of some window, it's sort of provocative, and people would rather listen to that than listen to the fact that yesterday the Supreme Court refused to hear the Pyramid Lake water right issue. I mean, that's part of the sea of dullness.
Yeah. People
don't want to hear that. They want to know. They want to hear me describe how I might have put the.
I'm not going to quote anything else out of the press. Is there anything else you'd want to say about the Academy Award night, or shall we close? Can we close on that? There was some talk that you were going to go to Wounded Knee, and I was wondering what changed your mind about that.
Well, I wanted to digress just for a second there. I have a great deal of sympathy for the fact that you try to put on shows that deal with serious issues. And there's a terrible conflict that you must have trying to make the show entertaining. You have to do that in order to keep that segment of the audience who's not particularly interested in the issues tuned into the station. And I think you do a yeoman's job. There's nobody else on television that does what you do. very often you're forced to make concessions. I mean, asking me questions about whether I threw horse manure on somebody, you know, that seems ridiculous on the face of it. But then it has a part, you know, that if you don't ask those questions, you don't have that kind of conversation, there are a lot of guys in their undershirts drinking beer just going to turn the station over to some other channel.
My God, what are they talking about?
Yeah. Nobody wants to hear about malnutrition among Indians. Nobody wants to hear about the fact that the Indians have the highest suicide rate of any group in the United States. That's dull stuff. People come home, they've got enough trouble, and they don't want to listen to it. They want to listen to the fripperies and the foolishness and the fun and the giggles and all that. So I think that you really deserve full credit for being able to wend your way through the broadcasting shows. And but I think that, as a matter of fact, you've touched an awful lot of people, and they've responded when they wanted to take you off the air for whatever reason it was. The hue and cry went up, and people did support you in full, and I was very glad for that, and I think everyone, finally, even those beer drinkers, will be benefited by it.
I got a lot of beer drinkers watching. Thank you. I'm humiliated when I'm complimented, and I must move on quickly. Did you dream that Last Tango would be such a bombshell in every way, that it would explode all over the place in the way that it did, or did you think it would just be accepted as another movie?
Well, I didn't know. No, those are just rolls of the dice, and you never know. I didn't know.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, I interrupted you or something on the subject of you were going to go to Wounded Knee and then decided not to, and it was never made.
I interrupted you.
You're right again.
Wounded Knee was surrounded by federal officers, marshals, state police, deputized ranchers, anybody who wanted to hold a gun and make himself feel good. Also, there were Indians, local Indians, that represented the administration view, who were opposed to AIM. And all that was needed to make it a flop was for me to go to Wounded Knee, be arrested by a vigilante group, or stopped by U.S. Marshals or something, and turned over to deputized conservative Indians. So then the headlines would be Indians repulse Brando at Wounded Knee, which was perhaps be the thing that the government would be looking for. And I tried to get into Wounded Knee, and but I wasn't able to. I went to Denver and set up I was going to meet somebody there, and they had trouble getting out Wounded Knee to meet me there, and it didn't work out.
Well, now I'll lapse back again. I'm fascinated with the furor over Last Tango. I wonder if anybody's able to see that movie for what it is, because of the fact that before it came out, a review appeared that said it was one of the greatest artistic events since Stravinsky's debut of Sacre du Printemps, so Pauline Kael's review. Have you found that anybody's able to watch the movie and see it for what it is, or do they know much too much about it beforehand?
Well, I haven't seen the movie, and I really don't think that I can. I don't know what I could say about it that might be useful or amusing or interesting.
Then we'll get off of that. Why do you downgrade acting as a profession?
What?
I say, why do you downgrade acting as a profession over the years?
What makes you think I do?
Well, I've read it in the press. Saw it in black and white.
I
can't believe the press. I don't know what we can believe in this country. You know what I mean, though you've said over the years
Well,
it's not a fit profession for a man.
In an effort to help your ratings,
Don't worry about it.
I'll maybe say something. I think that we couldn't survive a second if we weren't able to act. That acting is a survival mechanism, and it's a social unguent, and it's a lubricant. And we act to save our lives, actually, every day. People lie constantly, every day, by not saying something that they think, or saying something that they don't think, or showing something that they don't feel, or trying to give the appearance of feeling something that they don't actually. I said that, didn't I?
Yeah, but that's not acting.
That is acting. That is
No, it
precise.
isn't.
Yes, it is.
But you know what I mean.
When you're
what you do on
frightened
the
or when
screen
you're
and-
nervous,
Huh?
when you're frightened or nervous in this chair, you're distressed or uncomfortable, or you're very angry,
Yeah.
and you know that that is not what is necessary well, what cannot be shown here. You control your face. You're a highly controlled person. And
Really?
and you have to do that.
I see. But you know what I mean is, we got into this on the phone. You say that that's acting. That's not. I'm motivated at that moment to do that, and I can do it. And suppose there's a guy here that I think is a schmuck, is a bore, and you invite frankness, and I can act like he's interested for a time. I'm motivated by that. But if you wake me up at 9 or 8 the following morning and say, do that same performance before a camera, and then do it again and again, I can't. Some people can. Some people do it wonderfully, and you seem to do it better than almost anybody. And so there've got to be gradations. I won't hear of the fact that what you do is no more than what I do.
Well, that isn't true. If you're working for an ad agency, some product, and you hate the guy that, the idea man, the boss, and you know that every time he comes in with some impossible notion, something that really makes you gag when you drive home on the freeway, you know damn well that you're not going to get a raise, or you're not going to get it shifted out of the position that you're in if you don't say, Leonard, I think that's terrific.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. And you even lean forward, put your elbows on to show enthusiasm, and you get a face for it, and you do it day after day after day in order to survive in your job.
But if you had to do the line, Leonard, I think that's terrific 6 times, and get something deeper and better into it time after time, that takes an actor.
What did you say?
I said, those are one-time things where you have an immediate motivation.
No, they're not one-time things, because it's a daily procedure.
Yeah, but the dialogue changes all the time. But you're able
The
to
dialogue
take
changes, but the motivation doesn't.
Are you
the
saying that I
motivation-
could play any role you can play as well as you can?
Well, that might not be true, but I don't think that I could play some roles as well as you could play them. I don't think I could play the role that you're playing now.
But this is me. I'm letting it all hang out.
No, it's not you.
It isn't. This ain't me.
I mean, I think that you're thinking of 60 things at once. How is it going? Is it getting dull? Is he upset and distressed and inarticulate? Is he bored? Is he offended? Yeah, here's a good time for a joke. We haven't got much time. You're thinking about 9 million things and reacting to what I say, and how's that going to be? Is that going to be offensive? No, that's good. So you're doing this editing at an insane rate. And and you have to do that, and that's your job. And you have this demeanor of levity and lightness and amusement and zest, and it's easy to ascertain that finally isn't what goes on in your mind or your feelings at all.
I just feel like all my clothes have been taken off.
No, but that's something that I couldn't do. I couldn't do what you do. And that's a different kind of acting. You're playing a different kind of role. But anyway, we've done enough. We've made enough concessions to. What are you doing there?
Oh, nothing. I just have a commercial to do. And you say you couldn't do it. Let's see if you're any good at it. All you do is look up and read off the. Any way you want. As they say in commercialdom, have fun with it.
No, I won't do it.
I'm glad you didn't. What do you mean, the man's incorruptible and that's what I hoped? You've made me even more self-conscious now. I feel like a kid who's, look, what is it?
Stevie Wonder gave me this on the airplane today, and it was very nice. He took it off his wrist and said, "I want you to have this." And it was very, very nice of him, very kind of him.
Let me ask you something. Or several. I was going to say I feel like a kid in a candy store because we can only take about 2 pieces out of all the things I want to talk to you and ask you about. I'm interested in so damn many things about you. Were you happy with the way The Godfather came out?
I'd rather not talk about movies. I don't think they're...
That's all right. Okay.
If we could figure out some way...
Did you like the book, The Godfather?
Well, we have so little time to talk about Indians, and there's so much to say about them that I think to talk about movies and stuff like that is such a misuse of time. But then I'm your guest, and I don't want to horn in on what your program's going to be about.
I wouldn't want you to. Okay, I'll talk about something. It bugs me that you, over the years, have acted so little. And it seems like there must be about 14 great plays and great films that you ought to do and ought to make. And I worry that this feeling that that acting is not a noble profession for a man maybe is what's kept you from it. I can now move on to something else if you like, but does that observation bug you at all?
No.
Is it none of my business? Are there roles you wish you'd played? Do you crave acting?
No. It's been a good living.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were in the lumber business and you went on the Dick Cavett show and somebody said, "Well, how do you like the lumber business, Ralph?" It is a business. It's no more than that. And those who pretend that it's an art, I think, are misguided. And acting is a craft, and it's a profession not unlike being an electrician, plumbing, or an economist. The way of getting on and providing food and shelter for yourself and family.
May I ask you one thing here? You've referred a couple times to things you did to make up for certain things you had done in the past. This is an interview with Truman Capote. And you referred to The Wild One as one of the things you want to make up for.
We're back at Space One. And I don't think that it's useful to refer to, confirm or deny anything that was written in the press. It's mostly money-oriented, and therefore I don't think it has any value.
Okay. Tell me then, when, way back in the 50s, when you were interested in the Indians' fishing rights, before it was fashionable to be so, what triggered that?
I read a book called Indians of the Americas. And I, after reading the book, realized that I knew nothing about the American Indian, and that everything that we are taught about the American Indian is wrong. It's inaccurate. And our school books are hopelessly lacking, perhaps criminally lacking, in revealing what our relationship was with the Indian. When we hear, as we've heard throughout all our lives, no matter how old we are, that we are a country that stands for freedom, for rightness, for justice, for everyone, it simply doesn't apply to those who are not white. It just simply doesn't apply. And we were the most rapacious, aggressive, destructive, torturing, monstrous people who swept from one coast to the other, murdering and causing mayhem among the Indians. There's one Indian in the... But that isn't revealed, because we don't like that image of ourselves. We don't like to see us. We like to see ourselves as perhaps John Wayne sees us. And and also what we've learned about the Indians has been largely taught to us by Hollywood and by motion pictures. They have educated us. So we naturally believe that when the Indians came, that the wagons circled and the Indians rode around and subjected themselves to terrible fire and died at a ratio of 65 to 1.
Both barrels of a shotgun would always get 2 Indians.
Yeah, and that wasn't the way it was at all. But anyway, Indians have been tragically misrepresented in films and in our history books, in our attitudes, in our reporting. And so we must set about to re-educate ourselves. Who are you looking at?
You.
Oh.
Oh, no, there's a message coming, but...
Oh, okay.
No, one thing I wanted to get into on that, too, was the subject of not only how the Indians treated on the screen, but off the screen. I know a guy who was in it.
Let me say another thing. At a time when we say, especially, that we are going to keep our treaties, and that we do keep our word, and that we, above all people, do keep our word, I think it's important to mention that there have been nearly 400 treaties written by the United States in good faith with the Indians, and every single one of them was abrogated. Means broken or changed or altered.
No exceptions. And the Indians howl when, with laughter, I guess, when they hear a public figure like a president saying other nations will laugh at us if we don't honor our treaty commitments.
Oh, yeah.
When they can think of 400 and, I don't know what the exact figure is, 31 examples of how we haven't in the past, and this would only be the 432nd case of it if we didn't. But I remember some years ago I read a piece by James Wexler, I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was. And he said that I don't think there's anybody who's as concerned, or a few people that I've met care so much about the quest for human dignity, something like this that we're involved in right now. That was referring to the civil rights movement. Did you ever meet Rosa Parks, or something, the name of the lady who...
No, I never did.
Who refused to give her seat to a white man on a bus in, was it Atlanta? And it kind of kicked off the whole bus protest.
Birmingham.
Was it in Birmingham? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing you then in Washington. And have you found that anything effective comes from these things?
Well, I think they say that it's the squeaky hinge that gets the grease, and the blacks would still be shuffling around picking peanuts and dying and starving. Of course, they haven't been all that much improved. If they hadn't made that noise, if they hadn't made that racket, somewhere there's some person out there that tells us, just be quiet, be calm, everything will right itself, and everybody will get their just desserts, but it never happens.
It'll all come out, right?
It never happens. People, if they just sit back and wait for white America to do something on their behalf, to recognize their rights as a people, to recognize the sovereign rights of, the Indians as a separate people, as a separate political, cultural entity within the confines of the United States, nothing's going to happen. The Indians have to shuffle. And
Hearing Charlton Heston say that always puts such an obligation on me, and they're auctioning his staff. But let me tell you what my show's about tonight, you sitting there or standing. My guest is an actor who towers when he's on the stage. He can dominate it. He is a commanding figure. How many ways can I put it? Literally, figuratively, every other way. He's also a nice guy, you'll be glad to hear. James Earl Jones is certainly a Broadway legend, and anybody lucky enough to have seen The Great White Hope and forgotten he was sitting in a theater was lucky indeed. Othello, the famous one, Fences, he's a film actor as well, and he has some doubts about his skill in that. I hope he'll tell us about that. I find that interesting. Field of Dreams, Dr. Strangelove, to name a few, if two is a few. And he's a television star, too. His latest series will be called Under One Roof. And I just kicked him. I'm sorry about that. We will talk about kicking guests and a whole lot more. Have you noticed that in every commercial you have to say "and more"? I know you so long. Can I call you James Earl Jones?
Yeah.
Let us do something you seldom see done. Let's proceed in an orderly fashion. You were born.
I was born James Earl Jones.
Okay. You have not changed it from Lance LaRue or anything?
No, my first stage name was Todd, though, because Todd is my nickname. As a kid, I was discovered one day out in the chicken yard.
Yeah.
Feasting on chicken feces.
Was that here in Manhattan, or? Now wait a minute.
This is Mississippi.
I've had so many guests come on and talk about eating chicken feces that if we could just skip this story.
We'll skip this story, okay.
You've taken me aback.
No, but the Todd came out of it's sort of a legend in Mississippi.
Yeah.
There was a character, a cartoon character. And he had one single hair growing out of the top of his head, and that's the way I looked when I was a kid, so they named me Todd. Tipton Todd was the character's name. Tipton Todd. The Turd Honda became my new name when I was caught feasting in the chicken yard.
Now, this was not last summer, of course. This was a long time ago. What possessed you to...
It looked great. It looked the marbleized, warm...
It actually does. It's like a Dairy Queen or something in another flavor.
Truffles, yeah.
Yeah. But you have gone on to eat other things, haven't you? I hope. Now, who caught you doing this, and what was said?
My young aunts. And they had they thought it was hilarious, because the look on my face was one of distaste. At least I had good taste. I knew it was not right, but I couldn't stop.
I'm already feeling sorry for the poor kid who's going to play you in the movies and has to do.
Oh, that must be Charles Barkley.
Would Charles Barkley play you?
From adulthood up to
Oh yeah, sure.
Great White Hope. Charles Barkley must play James Earl Jones. I wouldn't have anybody else do it.
Lets me out, doesn't it?
Well, you can play me as a younger man, and Charlton Heston can play me as an older man.
Now, whenever I, reading stuff about you, your grandmother figures in it. I wish I could think of the adjective you said about her. Was it spellbinding? Was it a grandmother who you said was a spellbinding?
She believed in spells, by the way. But she also told spellbinding stories. So that as bedtime stories, it didn't matter what she told us. It didn't have to be soothing and little sheep jumping over, picket fences. It could be horrors, and it was horrors. It was lynchings and rapes and murders, which she witnessed in her childhood, and hurricanes and floods. She told all the dramatic stories that she could share with us.
Oh, see, I took it to mean she told you like Grimm's fairy tales and things like that. These were grim fairy.
I don't think she knew the Grimm fairy tales.
You were a small kid, and she would tell you about lynchings she had witnessed.
Oh yeah. She wanted us to know how dramatic life was, and she was the first one to concede to my being an actor. The others were very much against it because they were farmers,
Now, what age are you talking about when this grandmother would enchant you with her stories?
Oh, from infancy, because she adopted me as an infant, as a few weeks old, I think. Mm-hmm. I don't have the details on that, but she adopted me from her own daughter.
In Mississippi.
In Mississippi, yeah.
And your dad had vanished before you.
I wouldn't use vanish. They just weren't there, you know.
I mean, he left the
my
scene.
mother was there with the milk, of course, you know, for a while, I'm sure, because I ended up pretty healthy, and then she was gone. But I can't say they abandoned or those words are too dramatic, really, and too, you know, suggesting of a trauma that was not caused by that. It's just that they weren't there. The depression was there. The boll weevil was there. And luckily, the farm and my grandparents were there, you know.
And but your father had gone to be in show business, hadn't he?
Well, by then, there was some misunderstanding about what parenthood was, what fatherhood was, and neither of my parents got it, you know. But grandparents were always much better at it anyway, so they inherited me. But he went off. He was a prize fighter at that time, an amateur fighter, and. After meeting me once as an infant, like weeks old, he then knew that was not for him, and so he went on to his fate in terms of boxing, into his destiny in terms of acting, you know, to New Jersey, to Jersey City, New Jersey.
So you didn't see him from when to when?
From that little encounter we had. When I was weeks old, I didn't see him until I was allowed to see him. I was forbidden to see him, really. So it wasn't all his fault.
Yeah.
21.
At 21?
Yeah.
And that didn't seem strange to you because you didn't have anything to compare it
I didn't.
with,
I didn't miss anybody,
Yeah.
except in the head, of course. You know, I have a so-called father somewhere, a so-called mother somewhere, and you can get sort of silly about it if you have nothing better to think about, you know.
You didn't take it personally that upon one meeting he decided you were not for him.
I think I scared him more than he scared me. You know. He picked me up, I let out a yell, he dropped me, and that, you know.
That's it.
That was it.
And on to the bus. And you met him 21 years later. I hope we can. Well, we will get to that eventually. But did the infant James Earl Jones have any kind of dreams? Or did you know what show business was or theater was?
I think
you had radio. I guess
we had radio, yeah, hooked to a car battery. But I got to say something about black people in this country, and I'm not an Afrophile, whatever that is. This means you file your Afro. But I think that rural people managed to hold on to some of the ingredients of what life in Africa was about, life in the old country was about. And one of it was a contentment. I read an Abiosa Nicole poem. He was from West Africa, great poet. And this poem about returning home to Africa after England, after education and careers in England, to return home and realize that it was not the pursuit of happiness, it was the pursuit of contentment. Something very simple that is available to everybody, you know. And we had that on the farm, not only in Mississippi, but we found it in Michigan as well.
Whereas people wouldn't envy your situation down there from the exterior. You weren't suffering as down
Might
there.
have been, but you couldn't have, you know, we felt wealthy. We grew our own food, you know.
Yeah.
And we knew there was racism and those horrors out there. Yeah. But our farm was a little feudal system unto itself.
And you had all those chickens in case you really got hungry. It's the chicken itself you're supposed to eat.
I found that out later. I was raised in a culture, and I don't mean a racial or my family was a culture unto itself. I was raised in a culture that allowed you to accept contentment. We were not striven, we were not driven, you know.
It's such an important thing. It sounds so simple to say.
It's hard, yeah.
I've always been interested in stuttering. I don't know why. I knew a stutterer as a kid, and of course, the human animal being what it is, everybody picked on him. And to learn that you were a stutterer is always alarming. Not alarming, startling, because you're known for your speech skills.
I
never heard you say, this is C-N-N. That would be too much. Here I am making fun of a stutterer.
That's the point, Phil. It's funny as hell, and I know it's
Can you play stuttering now if you have to?
Oh, yeah, I'm doing a movie with Robert Redford coming up. God, is it next month, I guess?
Yeah.
And
she said it was Robert Duvall.
what did I say?
I think did you say Redford?
Did I?
Yeah. Redford's the one with the facial imperfections.
With the mole.
That's different from Stuttering, but
Yeah.
well, you
No,
started to say Redford and you got stuck in...
I got Duvall on the brain, actually, because I did a movie with him just to be in the movie with him. I think I had 10 lines in a movie called Convicts.
To watch him work?
No, just to be in the movie with him, just to say I was in a movie with Robert Duvall.
But you and I were talking about Redford earlier.
Yeah, and that's how my mind sort of is like the plates slipping in California.
Your templates.
Yeah, right. Yeah. When you get past 50, that does happen.
Yeah, and they do look
If you're
a lot
lucky.
alike. You know, they're both blonde and they both have... go ahead. I'm sorry. I've derailed what was a very
But
decent
I
conversation.
get to play in a movie with him coming up with Duvall. And my motive is similar. I want to be in another movie with Duvall, you know. And I get to play his brother, his half-brother. And at the read-through that we had last Friday, I guess it was, in L.A., the director said he caught me stuttering a little bit, you know. And I said, yeah, I'm sorry, it does happen sometimes. He said, no, I want that to be a part of your character. I said, thank you. I never played, you know.
You thought he had spotted a stutter in you and...
No, he said to me, he caught me stuttering.
Oh, he caught
during
you.
the reading. And first I apologized. He said, no, I want that to be a part of this character. So for the first time I will have to deal with it, you know, as an artist in a way. And I don't know how a stutterer really functions. I've spent so much time getting away from it, I don't know how one gets to it.
I was going to say you probably couldn't play, be like someone who's cured of a bad leg, having to play someone with a bad leg. And like, how is it you do that again? Well, are the two categories, is there the stammerer who stops on the first consonant and can't say my 6th grade teacher, or is that stammering or stuttering?
That's stammering, yeah, where you get blocked.
Then there's that one that British professors all have. One wants to say quite seriously that
Exactly.
you know, and so much that their students
The
imitated
the sound
it.
gets repeated like machine gun.
Yeah.
I think the stammer is more dramatically interesting, so I'll probably go for that, you know.
Yeah. Tell me what caused you that. It's supposed to always be psychological.
Well, it is psychological and also physiological, because it's related to, as far as I understand it, the epilepsy phenomenon, you know, but more like petit mal, where you trip, you know, there's a tripping.
Yeah.
And I think emotional jams and traumas that are buried can set it off, you know. It's little triggers in there.
So, but it came on when you were a kid, and I remember a very dramatic account of, there was one point where they wanted to take you to your other grandparents, and you didn't want to make that move.
Yeah.
When we come back in the next segment, would you mind telling that? I think that's
I'd love to.
wonderful stuff. So, by the way, I hope that Plaza Atene bed is big enough for you. Is it even crosswise? Yeah, it's nicely made up.
I could have brought the whole family. You know?
We were talking about, it was moving, as I recall reading it about you, but in which there was a point where you were going to be transferred from one set of grandparents to the other as a little kid.
This was after the decision when the boll weevil had its day, and the Depression was in 1935.
You're not using boll weevil as symbolically for anything. You mean that really
Oh,
the boll weevil destroyed
the bug.
Yeah.
Got the cotton, the bug that ate the cotton.
Yeah.
And the decision was to move to Michigan, where it was really cold.
Oh.
and they were going to spare me the move to Michigan, and by taking me over to Memphis from Tate County, Mississippi, to my paternal grandmother, to Robert Earl's mother.
You were happy where you were with the set you were with.
Well, I didn't know.
Yeah.
They were the people I knew. And then when I got to her house, she was very pretty. I mean, a gorgeous woman. She could have been a Hollywood starlet. My Robert O's mom. She was a Gibson girl, with everything, you know.
Really?
And I saw her in the picket fence and the rose bushes, and it looked ideal, and I wanted no part of it. So I hung onto the mattress that was in the back of the seat, which, you know, to replace what we now use sleeping bags, you know. And my uncle and my my grandfather accepted that I would stay with them.
You were not about to get out of that car.
No. It was a very simple gesture of hanging on to the mattress. You know, I didn't argue with him. I just hung on.
Now, did you know that Rose's picket fences and this ideal house were not right for you, or were you afraid that these people were not right for you?
I was not ready to leave the people I was with.
You want to change.
That's simple. You know.
Yeah.
Children have a hard time, changing shoes and changing families.
Yes. My wife cried when they gave away the old refrigerator, and I understand that. I don't want anything changed.
Yeah.
According to somebody who maybe had to neaten up an article, that was where your stutter or stammer set in. Is that demonstrable?
Well, I don't like to blame it on kinfolks, because it's so easy to get back to say, well, because they abandoned you. Well, there wasn't a choice they had, and two, I didn't miss them. I didn't miss that beautiful grandmother. I got to know a little bit later on.
Yeah,
but I didn't know who she was. I know who Mama, Papa, who her grandparents were, and my aunts and uncles. I knew who they were, and I knew who the chickens were, and the pigs, and the cows, and the
I don't
dogs.
blame you for holding on to that mattress. Yeah. And they finally just said, well, he isn't getting out of the car. We're going to have to
on to Michigan.
Keep him.
Yeah.
But the body can't adjust from a Mississippi climate to a Michigan climate.
It's somewhere it happened in there. By the time I got to Michigan, I was a stutterer, And also because by the time I got to Michigan, school started.
Mm-hmm.
And all the attention on what you say and how correctly you can say it. And changing your southern accent to a northern accent, all that. It became unfocused, and it was just too much, too much.
So you were conspicuous. Were you the only black kid they had in that school?
We were one of 3 large black clans that were in Manistee County, Michigan. There were the Bean family, the Connolly family, and then there was one other family.
Yeah. So you weren't a novelty by being...
We were such a novelty that when we went to visit the Methodist church, they didn't know what to do. So they sang a song that my grandmother interpreted as racist. Something about old Black Joe, But they knew no other song. They wanted to serenade us, and we walked in, and
they thought that would be appropriate. Old Black Joe.
Of course. I mean, my grandfather, who is totally different from my grandmother. My grandmother says, racism. They shoot the bastards. And he said, wait a minute, maybe they, let's consider the other side.
Maybe they were trying to be nice.
Maybe they were trying to be nice.
Oh, Lord. Well, I ran across a thing that Mark Twain wrote that in some of his early writing. A preacher had refused to do the burial ceremony because the dead man was an actor. An actor led to sin, and this preacher would not preside on this thing. And of course, you can imagine Mark Twain getting off on that subject and pointing out how the fact that the theater had probably moved more people's souls and elevated them than 800 sleep-inducing, snore-making preachers in 100 years. And the idea that show folk, as recently as Mark Twain, were considered the devil.
As recently as my grandparents. Yeah.
And when you wanted to be one?
Well, I didn't know if I wanted to be one. My uncle, Randy, who ended up with Boeing Aircraft as an engineer, which is something kind of my family, whoa, that's not supposed to happen to the Conleys, And we're quite proud of it. But even at the age of 14, he was already in that mode of becoming an engineer. He had the mind of one, and I'm 10 years old, and I had to compete with him. So I said, well, then I'm going to go off to New York and be an actor on the stage. Whop! My grandfather, who was standing behind the screen, heard this, and that was...
Whop was a literal whack on the head.
Whack on the head. Yeah.
Get that idea out of your head.
Out of your head.
Because that was sinful, that was the way to produce.
Well, they were farmers, and they didn't understand how you could be a troubadour, and, going from town to town. You call that making a living? It didn't make any sense to them. They didn't even get to the sin part. It just it didn't make any sense.
Did any of them live to see what became of you?
Well, that crazy grandmother who told us all those horror stories. She was the first one that would sneak over to the summer theater where I was working out, 20 miles away in Manistee, to see the plays. Just plays like Stalag 17, real dramas, And she'd come over there and watch. And I knew she loved it because it was her stuff. The heavier the drama, the better she liked it. Othello, yeah, let's see that.
But none of them lived to see the James Earl Jones that we now know be...
No.
Is this goodbye? I can't believe it. Will you come back tomorrow night? Yes or no?
Oh, if I can have that bed again, yeah.
You can have it.
With the yellow.
We'll see that the bed is made up for you. James Earl Jones, the best is yet to come.
It's nice to sit down.
Do you know each other? Have you ever had the pleasure of meeting?
I did my very first movie with Dame Sybil.
Which one was that?
What about that? I did a movie called Alive and Kicking. Do you remember?
Oh my goodness, wasn't that fun?
It was terrible. And we did Shake Hands with the Devil.
We did it in a little island.
That's right, up in Oban.
Yes, near Oban.
And the second movie I did with you.
What is that?
Shake Hands with the Devil.
Shake
Jimmy
Hands with the Devil.
Cagney.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what? Oh, in Ireland.
In Ireland. Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
I remember a marvelous thing actually, that in the mornings, I don't know if you remember this, but early in the morning, you used to take the daily newspaper and you would learn a passage from it, if you remember.
Would I?
And then you would have one of us sit back and you would show how you had learned it, But and I said to you, I remember saying to you, why do you do that? And you said, well, I don't want the mind to go. I must keep practicing,
I know, I'm beginning to feel it slipping.
You're not at all. I've been listening to you.
I know that, do you know that she also studies Greek? Didn't you take up Greek?
I took up Greek about 8-10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I still read it every morning. Mind you, I'm not very good, but it's ancient Greek and it's classical Greek. But, I had real jam once. I played Hecuba on the air. 3 speeches from Hecuba in Greek.
In Greek?
Pes amphitorna spid hectoros pedo. Doesn't that sound lovely?
That's my favorite line.
Isn't it?
Gee, that sounds good. Mr. Harris,
yes.
Politeness
yes,
toward one side.
Oh, yes, you've been ignoring it.
I can't help noticing that...
You wanted to mention it. Everybody else is worried about it.
Well, I can't help noticing that a lot of your face is not injured. What have you done?
Well, all I can say is I didn't fight a bull.
I have a bullfighter sitting here without a mark on him. And
what? I think I know what you feel.
Without,
you know what I feel.
Without cape.
Without cape.
You forget the cape.
Yes, I'm afraid that by the time I tell this story, in 2 weeks' time, I'll probably have won the fight. But I'm a born liar.
Was there another person involved?
Yeah, there was, yeah. I lost it.
Was it
Can you get the camera? Can you see it? It's beautiful, huh?
Was it anyone we know?
Well, I sincerely hope that if you ever meet him again, you might pass on this remark for me. No, I ran into small bit of trouble last night.
Oh.
Small bit.
Yes. Well, could you give us any tips on how to avoid the kind of trouble you ran into?
I don't know. I remember I keep, for some strange reason, I don't get paid for this. You get paid to fight those bulls, but I don't get paid for this. But I spend some kind of, a large portion of my life in fights, I suppose. One tries to avoid them. Yeah. But I remember in New York, about the last time I did your show, actually, I was in New York. I got into a fight in a bar, and the thing was going. One word bothered another. There was a fight, a punch-up and all that. But I thought, this is getting too rough for you, Harris. You're too old. You're 40. You can't do this anymore, you see. So I thought, well, the only thing I can do is get out of it. So the row started, and I jumped over the bar, and I hid behind the bar because punches were going like mad. And I hid behind the bar, and I said, let them fight, you see. And there was a guy beside me, crouching too. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm ducking Harris. And the two fellas who started the fights were both under the bar, hiding behind the bar from each other, while everybody else was killing each other.
Who would be silly enough to fight anyone your size?
Well,
apparently you've been able to find them, whoever they are.
I can't. The only good thing about this, you know, the only good thing was it was over a woman, and I guess that's worth it, you know.
Oh yes. We are, and Richard Harris has just asked for a glass of water.
I didn't ask for a glass of water, but I got it. do you know that just bring something rather back, sort of nostalgic things back. You know that when I began my first movie, was honoured to be with you, and also James Cagney. You know, one spends those ones. Yeah, James Cagney, absolutely superb man, an absolutely beautiful, beautiful man. And I remember sort of, you know how as a child you see him on on the screen, his style, his technique, how he works and all that, and having been brought up on his movies and finally doing my first movie with him, it was very interesting to see that, the styles in which he works, how he arrived at a certain style of acting, which is extraordinary. I remember the very first day shooting, I wasn't called, I wasn't working that day, but I insisted on going to see him. You see, my God. So I went, I sat behind the camera, and there he was. And it's interesting because the whole thing, his whole style sort of was derived from mistakes. From mistakes he would make. Yeah, it's interesting this, that, apparently, unlike you, he had a very bad memory for lines. He couldn't quite remember his lines. And, that if he'd walk in, for instance, he'd walk in and say, Dick Cavett, that's my glass of water, and you sit down there, right? So Cagney would say, action, take one, he'd walk in, he'd come in, he'd walk in the door, and he'd dash through the door, he'd say, now listen, glass of water. They say, oh no, it's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. So he'd stop and he'd go out again. Now take 15, you could see him trying to get it all together. Dick Cavett, you must remember the name. Dame Sybil, glass of water. He's got to get it right. So take 10. He was angry, paralytic out the door, saying, gotta get it right, gotta get it right. So he'd dash through the door again, he'd say, Dame Sybil, oh, it's wrong. You see? But finally at the end, he'd get it all together. And you could see he's working hard. So he'd come through again, and suddenly take 10 or take 20 now, and he'd come through and he'd say, Cavett, Thorndike, water, sit down. Absolutely superb, yeah.
Louis was the judge in that. Do you remember My Husband?
That's right, he was. That's right, yeah.
Which is lovely.
I heard you mentioning Bernard Shaw. That I've just done a movie, Man in the Wilderness, and with a man called Henry Wilcoxon, who originally played Antony in Antony and Cleopatra, Turner Colburn, a long time ago. But he worked with Bernard Shaw, and it was a marvelous story. He said that how brilliant the man was and witty the man was. It was a marvelous story that they were doing Antony and Cleopatra in London, and Cedric Hardwicke was in it. I can't quite think of the lady at the time, but they were upstaging each other like mad, like mad. They were pulling strokes and pulling tricks, and they were trying to get the best views of each other and all that, And Bernard Shaw was sitting in the audience, and he stopped. He said, wait a minute now. He said, stop it. He said, I want to talk to the cast. So he said, drop the curtain. They dropped the curtain. He came back, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, he said, Mr. Hardwicke and Madam, he said, this play is called Antony and Cleopatra, not Antony versus Cleopatra.
I love it. Just like him.
Well, let me ask you something that's a complete change of subject, but I heard an intriguing thing involving you and a ghost.
Yes, my house.
Is this true?
Yes. I have this.
What is it?
Well, I have the extraordinary house, which has a sitting tenant. He's a sitting tenant, the ghost.
What is a sitting tenant?
Well, he's in the house. When I bought, I bought the house, and I bought what I thought to be vacant possession of the house. It didn't have a tenant in it, living in it. I discovered after a couple of months I had a ghost in the house.
How do you learn that you have a ghost, and what's the best thing to do?
Well, the best thing to do is to run. I'll resell the house.
What evidence do you have?
He has appeared to people staying in the house, and he causes them. He's marvelous, actually, because I got very annoyed with him once that I was doing Cromwell here, and I came back late at night and tried to get a good night's sleep, and the ghost appears at night. He knocks the doors. He rings bells that nobody can find where the bells are in the house. And yes, he runs around the stairs and slams and doors and throws things, but nice and quietly, though.
Did you see this ghost before getting this injury here in the...
No,
I'm sorry.
No, it's quite all right.
You are,
keep reminding me.
Are you really convinced? Have you thought of calling in the Psychic Research Society?
Well, I could have him exorcised. I did tell him once. I faced him once. I said, now look, I have to work all day, you know, and sleep all night. You sleep all day and you haunt all night.
Now, are you pulling any of our legs?
No,
or,
I'm not.
or-
And I said, look, unless you behave yourself and you enjoy here, I don't mind you living here. You can live here rent-free. But however, if you don't behave, I'll have you exorcised.
Will you cross your heart and say this is all true?
Absolutely true. Word of honor.
Why
true.
would you be afraid of a ghost? I mean, I would give anything to have a house
Well, there
with a
was
ghost in
well,
it.
there was that.
Wouldn't
There
you
was
like a ghost?
Oh, I'd be terrified.
There was a moment, a particular moment when I knew about the ghost before, for instance, and I was scared when it might appear, or when I might be, you know, evidence, you know, of it existing in the house. And then the very first time that, you know, the actual thing did appear and made noises and that, I was scared then. But
Have
then
you tried to speak to this thing?
Yeah, I have. We get on marvelously, actually. I'm terribly fond of him, you know.
Have you seen him?
No, I haven't. No.
Just a voice?
No, but last week, but marvelous thing actually was that, you know, I've got a very good friend in England at the moment, and he's a thief, and he's a good friend of mine, but he's a thief, and so when I bought the house, I thought, now I must have the house burglar-proof, right? So, what best, or who better man to get than a thief to advise me where I should have burglar-proof, right? So I had him come to the house, and I said, look, it's Tower House, name of my house. I gave him the name of the house. And he said, oh, my God. He said, that's a very strange house, that. He said, you know, he said, when he saw the for sale sign up, you know, he thought, well, anybody who buys this house must have money. So it's now vacant, so I'll break into it now, and I'll look, and I'll see where I can get in when somebody buys it, right? So he gets into the house, and he hears a child crying upstairs. And he thinks, oh my God, he thought that, you know, that some kid had broken into the house and was locked in and couldn't get out. And he went upstairs and he thought, now what am I going to do? Am I going to ring the police, you know, and say there's a child locked in, or they're going to ask me they're going to ask him what was he doing here, which of course he'd be arrested for breaking and entering. And so he thought, you know, that he would get the kid out. And he went up to this particular room where the child lives in, and went in, opened the door, and there was nobody there. It's absolutely truthful. I swear. I know I'm full of lies, but this is true. This is true.
This is true. Yeah. And you haven't called in any researchers or people who, because there are people who busting to see ghosts.
Well, there are people who have come to the house, and very strange. A very strange woman at 2 or 3 in the morning arrived one night and said, "Can I come into your house?" And I said, "Certainly not." She said, "Well, there's a ghost here, I know, and I will tell you which room the ghost is in." And she came into the house, and she walked past everything, up the stairs, up here by the tower, opened the doors, and got to one door and said, "There, there's a ghost."
And that was the room?
Yeah, it was the room, yeah. Interesting.
Extraordinary.
And
Yes.
living rent-free, which upsets me. I could do that.